Hello, this is Christina Barton. You're watching Black Tea News. Hello, welcome to Black Tea News. I'm your host, Christina Barr, and today we're going to be talking about something I'm sure that you guys have seen before. There's a super viral video of Matt Walsh talking to an EMT. We already talked about another very viral moment from that day when he gave his lecture, but Matt did a fabulous job. I just want to add like my 2 cents on a couple things, and I mentioned that I would, and so to me it kind of seemed like a slower news day, so I decided that I would at least talk about that today. Also, I wanted to go through this article that I read today from a socialist. I guess it's kind of a spoiler alert, but I was not surprised when I got there in the article, and then they admitted they were an atheist socialist. But someone wrote an article about how parental rights is really about seeing your kids as property, which I thought was pretty interesting, because I'm sure this is a person who's probably like far left and thinks, is pro-abortion, all kinds of other things, which they did end up mentioning abortion in the article. But she right out the gate comes for Christianity, and it just goes on from there. So I thought it was a bit humorous and telling, because these people resent that parents want to instill particular morality into their children, and they resent that because they believe that they should be the ones indoctrinating your children, and the state should be the ones indoctrinating your children. So I just want to take you all on a journey so we can peek into their minds. Also, President Biden had some trouble answering a child's question. His son Hunter, who I guess it's his son, but I just would not have him around the public eye doing like official president stuff while he's, under investigation and has so much just shady stuff all around him. But that's his kid. Of course, he loves them, and he frankly doesn't care what we all think. So, but he helped him along, and then he answered a question. And I thought how he answered it was, in principle, fine. I'm not going to go through the whole entire transcript, I guess, but I wanted to show you that little snippet. And if we got time, we'll complain about the IRS and how they're coming for your Venmos. So before we jump into everything, I want to encourage you guys to go blackteanews.com, check out different content on the website, different articles, etc. Please make sure that you guys are dropping in your email so you know when we have different events, or when there's different announcements, or if something happens on one of the platforms and you're like, where did your stuff go? And it's like, you should have signed up for email so I can keep you updated. So just make sure that we have that form of communication with each other. I promise I don't bombard you with emails. If anything, I don't send enough, but and I will get on that, I suppose, but just make sure that you sign up for emails. If you like what I do here at blackteenews.com, consider giving a donation at blackteenews.com/donate. Cost of stream, cost of run my website, all that good stuff. I could use some other things like different equipment and so on. So if you like what I do here, please consider expanding in that kind of way. It's interesting, I get a lot of people say things like, you should run for office, you should run for office. I feel like this is kind of where I'm supposed to be at right now in this sphere, trying to, inform masses and offer my perspective in that sort of way. Not that I really don't want to run for office. I've done it before, actually. But you can't run for office if you can't get support that way either. So if what I do here compels you to give that sort of compliment, help what I actually do here. Because if I did run and you didn't support financially anyway, you'd be kind of gaslighting me anyway. So just if you can help in that way, and if you do want me to continue making a difference, at least what I'm doing here, consider helping out in that kind of way. And if you can't, I understand if you can't, and I frankly understand if you just kind of don't want to, but I thank you guys for watching. I thank you guys for commenting. All those things really do help. I know some of you have encouraged other people to watch, so it's very much appreciated. You can also support by going to the Black Teen News store and check out different merch that we have on the store. Like, I posted a picture with me and my cup, and someone's like, I want that. I'm like, well, you can get it at the store. Also, the You're Not That Special. It's not pumpkin spice season anymore, but I have these two. I thought they're pretty funny. I drew that little Trump, by the way. I drew him. So check out different merch at the store. And also, make sure that you guys are pre-ordering. Of course, God is Blatantly Against Abortion. Very excited for you guys to read this. So you can get it on Barnes & Nobles right now. You can go to Amazon and get the ebook version right now, but it will be available in paperback and other kind of platforms, other different mediums, and on different platforms as well. The audiobook is not recorded right now, but there will be. I won't put that off too far in the future, just trying to get everything ready for the actual launch of the book, and then we'll, keep giving you options. Anyway, I do have a meme for you guys. This will play eventually into the story that we will talk about with the article, but you've probably seen the bird. It's like boo, that boos people get better material. So they put like a NPC kind of person. This is extremely dangerous to our democracy. It's like boo, get better material, and they look, and that's all they got to say. So you'll see people on the right and the left say this all the time, but people on the left are particularly saying it all the time. And the article that addresses like parental rights, that's also their shtick too. So I thought it was relevant, but we're going to table that though. We'll go back to it. I want to talk about the Matt Walsh thing. Yeah, I'm going to talk about it before I talk about the Biden thing. So again, you guys have probably seen this before, but you know what? Before I show that, let me show you guys this video of my friend, This Is Savvy, because she did, someone on Twitter posted this really great video she did about cisgender, and it's worth sharing before we go into Matt's video.
Hey humans. Well, I've been getting comments like this.
So before you hear what Savvy has to say, the comment, since you guys probably can't see it because it's too small, but I assume it's too small. That little comment said, was replying to someone who was a trans woman and was saying, you guys, want people to respect your pronouns, respect the fact that we don't want to be called cis. That's the gist of the comment. Not word for word, but the gist of it. So here's, obviously this is a stitch. So that snippet of however she responds, he responds. I don't have that here. I just have what Savvy says in response to his response.
This is what's weird to me, and I don't know if it'll ever make sense. You can call yourself whatever you want, define yourself however you choose. It affects me not at all. I know who and what I am, and I'm confident in that. So your self-perception means absolutely nothing to me. That doesn't seem to be true on the flip side, or else we wouldn't be having this argument over the word cis. This is where I get confused. If the word cis was created for people like me, why do people like you get so mad when we reject it? The question isn't why do women reject cis? We don't need a reason. The question is, why do you get so mad when we do? The truth is, the word cisgender, cissexual wasn't created for us. It was created for you. It was created as an antonym to transsexual, to give validity to your experience, which is why women reject it. Not to say you're invalid, but your sense of validity is not our responsibility. The concept of gender identity doesn't exist for most people, so why would we adopt a word where it does?
Boom. If you don't follow Savvy on TikTok, that's her biggest account. She's over 1 million followers on TikTok, but on Twitter she's very spicy. She also has a YouTube channel. She does great stuff, but yeah, I do find cis to be demeaning. Not that I'm losing sleep over it or something like that, and like I'm so angry because you called me cis or they used the word. It's not really like that, but it is demeaning. The purpose of it is to demean women because you're trying to include other people who aren't women into that category. And so you're trying to dilute the what we are, you know, or and now you have, in which we talked about this yesterday, people who are trying to just absolutely reject biology, period. And so before it was just like, oh, we're just talking about gender identity and gender biology are different, they're separate, they're not the same thing, even though, you know, the words are used interchangeably and stuff. And now we're heading to territory where there's like, well, the biology doesn't really matter. Or I've seen some trans men say, well, we can take hormones and things and that will change our biology. It won't change the important things about your biology, the things that legitimately make men men and women women. And you can say, well, you're just reducing people down to their chromosomes or their gametes or their genitals. I guess really the gametes, but that's better than you referring to women as some kind of mood ring. You know, you can't just feel us out and decide that you are one. So great video from Savvy. She does great stuff. So anyway, let's move into Matt Walsh video. 1 second. I load it up. And again, I'm sure that you guys have seen this, but it's worth watching and talking about again.
How would you define a woman? Because you've asked other people up here to define how we would define a woman. How would you define a woman, Mr. Walsh?
An adult human female.
And how doesn't a transgender woman fit that definition?
So, again, I think Matt does a great job. It's been I guess a week or so since I watched it, so I don't remember his full response. So, but as I just noted, you have people say, well, female is different than woman, right? Not really so, but the argument was, well, female and woman is different. Woman is just about your identity, and female is about sex. So he says, so Matt says a woman is an adult human female. And so now the response is, how does that not fit trans women? How can you be a female if that's based by sex? So already we're getting off the rails here.
Because they're not female. They have. You said that you are a biological male, correct?
I said I'm transgender. I might be intersex for all we know. About almost as many people in the world are transgender as intersex, and a lot of people don't know.
Well, but that's a different conversation. Intersex, that's a genetic anomaly, that's a medical condition. So that's a completely different conversation. That's also not a third gender. That's a genetic anomaly that occurs within the sex binary of male and female. So what you're saying is that a quote-unquote trans woman is a female?
By the definitions I'm familiar with, yes.
So how would you define female?
Through my training in healthcare, there are several different categories for how we define sex. People bring up chromosomes. People also bring up hormone levels. People bring up all sorts of other categories. Lots of people don't fit neatly into a gender binary, even people we don't consider to be intersex. It's a complicated spectrum.
It's not complicated, but you also didn't define. So what is a woman? What is a female? What do these words mean?
It's complicated, and I know you're not going to like that answer, but that's because there are no simple answers in human biology.
Let me ask you a question.
You guys, hang on.
So, there is a simple answer within biology. Like your gametes are going to define that it is binary. There's only two options, and just because there might be some kind of mutation or something along those lines, is still coming from the two binary. And even though that people may look more masculine or their hormones may be off or other things like that, that doesn't change who you are. So throwing out I could be intersex for all I know, that's I guess it could be true, but you're just kind of grasping at straws.
Just let me finish. You guys like to bring up high school level biology classes a lot. I get that a lot. But people who go on to more complicated biology classes will talk about sex as a spectrum.
It's not. It's not.
Well, biological researchers would disagree with you.
Well, then they're full of shit, the ones that would say that. There are...
All right.
There are male gametes and female gametes. Oh, I had one last question. I just have one. I had one quick. Can you come back for 1 second? Because this is an important question. You said you're an EMT.
Yes.
Okay. If you're responding to a health emergency. Biological male, somebody with a penis, is having a medical emergency, and they say to you, "I think I'm having a miscarriage." Would you check them to see if they're having a miscarriage? Would you consider that a possibility for them?
Look. No, but that's because...
And that moment is so great because it's obvious he's like stumped but doesn't want to say, and took that breath. Like, look, I love that, but at least he admitted it. So let's I gotta watch his body language when as he goes on.
Some people don't have body parts. Doesn't mean they're not a woman.
Okay. Sounds like we've established there are some people who, in principle, can get pregnant, and there are some people who can't. So there's two categories, otherwise known as binary.
Lots of women can't get pregnant either.
Yeah, but they're still of the nature to get pregnant. The only
but
reason
they can't get pregnant.
Yes, but
truth matters, right?
That smug thing going on right there with his face. That's why I wanted to play this video and talk about this. And I've talked about this before. Yeah, there are women who can't get pregnant, and from the beginning of time, that has been a great pain for women, because so much of our value has been wrapped up in our sex and producing civilization. And it's a very important thing. And that's not the only thing we are as human beings. But particularly, as civilization was building itself and populating itself, there was a great importance on. There's a great importance on it now, and people don't, I guess, care like they should, because our people are like, oh, there's too many people. We're actually not even meeting our replacement rate in the U.S., but that's kind of another story. But women who find out that they can never have kids, who want to have kids, it's devastating, especially if they want kids and they can't do it for whatever reason. And it can be devastating for men too. If something's wrong, they're shooting blanks, but women who can't bear their children, or maybe they can, but they something's wrong, so they spend a bunch of money in IVF, which I'm not a fan of, but people will go to great lengths to be able to have children. And to throw out like, well, some women can't get pregnant, and then that snooty little look that he has, it's so toxic. It's so toxic. He doesn't belong in women's spaces. He doesn't belong in any sort of category as woman. And he doesn't belong in any category as an honorable man either, to use this pain that women have and to use it as a crowbar to pry open what womanhood is, to try to break in. He's an emotional criminal is what he is. And it's really disgusting. How this will come up time and time and time again. If women can't get pregnant and they are of the age of being fertile, being able to do it, normally there's something wrong, and you need to get that checked out. And maybe there is some kind of help you can get. Maybe there is no solution and you'll just be barren for the rest of your life. That can be a huge point of emotional trauma for women. So for someone to bring that up, and it's not just him, a lot of people do it. Even women will do it, like these sicko allies who are, I don't know why they go to such great lengths to hurt other women who will just not affirm this madness. But it's cruel, you know, I mean, I know women who had to have like hysterectomies and they didn't know if they would have kids, and they went on and like adopted and other things, and God bless them, you know, they have have their families in other kind of unconventional sort of ways. But that's what I wanted to add. This face here, that face, I got you. And he even said, you know, facts, you guys care about the facts. The facts are is you're a tool bag and you don't care about women, and you don't belong in women's spaces. You don't belong in the category of women just because you want to use the pain of women and emotionally abuse them to kick the door open and say, you know, Johnny's home, you know, or here's Johnny. That's not where you belong. That's not your place. And it's really, really, really sick. Really, really sick. And I've said this before. I'll say this again. Out of 7 kids, me and my brother are the only ones who were born with 10 fingers. Everyone else was born with like my sister right above me. She had 11. And the other ones had 12. It was just like, you know, little nubbin growing out of, you know, their pinky area. And they didn't have any bones. So they just tied rubber bands to it, or the first 2, I think maybe you got them just snipped off. But that's just an abnormality. It doesn't mean that human beings are born with 12 fingers. They can be. But you don't go to like anatomy class and teach that fingers are on a spectrum, or, you know, you teach what we're supposed to be. You know, if you were convinced that you were a mermaid, or in this case, a merman, makes me think of Zoolander, if you've ever seen the film. If you were convinced that you were a mermaid and they're like, bro, no, there's no mermaids, and you pointed to someone who had webbed feet and was like, she, that's, no, you're just chasing a dream and putting down whoever you can to get to where you want. And it's sick. So, let's finish this out.
It does. That's what I'm trying to explain to you.
Truth matters, and they can't get pregnant. That's the truth. So how are they still women?
Because they are.
I know we just had this whole conversation, but I forgot he was going to say more. And it just got more toxic, just progressively more toxic, repeating that. There's seems to be like a little smile kind of on his face, because he's just so glad at that point that he made, like, boom, owned you, and not caring about what other kind of collateral damage in his wake. It's just sick. It's not what women are supposed to do. It's not what men are supposed to do either. Men are not supposed to be this way. I know there's bad men who do bad, toxic things, but this isn't supposed to be what masculinity is. But I don't know how much masculinity he has left, since he's tried to flush it out of his system.
For the same reason that I can rightly say that human beings have 2 legs. And if a person is born with only 1 leg, that doesn't call into question the statement that human beings have 2 legs, okay? A person being born with 1 leg doesn't mean that now legs are on a spectrum, and we can't say anything at all about how many legs a person has. Who knows? They could be a centipede. You know, they could have 100 legs. No, we know human beings have 2 legs. If a human is born without 2 legs, something went wrong. They were supposed to have that second leg. Something went wrong. If you meet a person on the street who only has 1 leg, maybe they had an accident. Maybe they were in war. Maybe something, you know, maybe they were in a car accident. Maybe they had cancer. A leg was cut off. But you know that something went wrong because by their nature, they're supposed to have 2 legs. Same thing for a woman. A woman by her nature can get pregnant. A man by his nature never can. So if you meet a woman of childbearing age, say she's 28 years old, and she can't get pregnant, you know automatically that something has gone wrong. And she can go to the doctor and find out what that thing is, even if they can't fix it. So that proves that women by their nature can get pregnant, because the simple fact that she can't shows you that there's something wrong. This is what is known as the exception that proves the rule. Whereas if a male with a penis can't get pregnant, no doctor on earth is going to run tests to see what's wrong with him, because they already know it's that he's a male, and there's only male and female, those who can get pregnant and those who can't. So that's it.
He just kind of shrugs a little bit and walks away in his shame. Yeah, but Matt did a great job with that Q&A. Really good job. Sometimes you watch things and you're like, say this. He pretty much nailed it, you know, in responses that I would say, or I obviously did just say. Like I said, I didn't remember everything that he said. Then he went on to just say things that I just ended up saying. But really, really good job for Matt. Moving on. Biden was answering some questions for some kids. I asked him what was the key to success. And I'll play the video, or at least the beginning of the snippet of the video. But I don't know how well you'll be able to hear it, and I don't have caps. So just explaining. They ask, what's the key to success? And he's like, huh? Like, he can't hear, can't understand. And they're like, what's the key to success? And then he mentions, like, we got to get rid of COVID. Like, if you don't hear someone understand, just keep asking what they're saying, and don't just like assume and make up some kind of answer. And then Hunter, who was with him, and again, I already said this, but I understand this is his son, but his son is entangled in so many sort of scandals and stuff and investigations, and I don't know if anything will come of that. I wouldn't hold my breath. But I don't know, I would just distance, and since he's kind of a weirdo and a sicko, I probably just wouldn't have him around while I'm talking about your kids. But I guess Biden's a little weird too. But he explained to him what the kids were asking, and then Biden actually went on to say something that I thought was actually true, but certainly doesn't apply to him.
Dad, he's got a question. What's your question?
Top definition.
What's the top what? What's the top success? Well, making sure that we don't all have COVID. What are you talking about?
It's a success. Like, what's the key to success?
What's the key to success? You know what I found out the key to success is? And I'm not sure I'm the best guy to explain it. These guys can tell you. The key to success is, whenever you disagree with someone, it's okay to question their judgment, whether they're right or wrong. But it's never okay to question their motive.
So, I thought that last bit of information was good. Like, it's okay to question someone's judgment, but don't question their motives. Unfortunately, him and his side do that all the time. And he promised to be like the adult in the room, that he's going to reunite the country. His whole pitch was, we got to save the soul of the nation, which is so pretentious and gross coming from him. But then it's like these awful, crazy MAGA Republicans. And if you look at what he means by these crazy MAGA Republicans, like, I can show you some crazy people, like, just to be frank, but he'll say something like they believe in the right to life. And I'm like, bro, that's so many people. And that just puts you on the crazy list. In his like red backdrop military sort of speech, it would be nice in politics if you could just have respectful disagreements with people. And I say that all the time. I can't say that I've always been like, you know, not coming. There were times I guess I came in too hot sometimes with folks, but I've been trying to do better. I think ultimately I am on the fairer side of life, and I encourage other people to be like an example. I tell people, I'm like, don't say things like Democrats can't be Christian. I'm like, don't say that. I'm like, you might have, like Biden said, you can question their judgment. Like, they're looking at different scriptures, about giving to the poor, etc. In their mind, they're just like, well, the government's supposed to do that. And I'm like, that's not charity, bro. That's the government confiscating money so they can give stuff probably to you. So that's probably why you're okay with it. But we're just looking at things differently. So we can try to meet in the middle and have conversations, and maybe I can make them come to the light and see things, from a different perspective and open their minds. But I'm not going to judge that their motive or their heart is in the wrong place, and that they don't love God. They just might not, be seeing things kind of clearly. Like, I'm sure I'll have lots of conversations with, people as I put out my book, and I have been having conversations with people about my book. Of course, God is blatantly against abortion. And I know that there's people who are pro-choice, and they don't like it, but they just don't want to, impose their beliefs on people, especially non-believers. And I'm like, being pro-choice isn't a passive position. Like, if we all did nothing and someone was pregnant, the baby would be born, right? But the abortion, whether you're for it or not, that is an act of aggression going from there. So, and then the woman's not like willing it to happen. She wants resources to do it right. Maybe she wants government funding. There's a lot of politicians and abortion lobbyists who are into that. And not only are they into it being funded and trying to get it funded, and in some cases, which I have references and stuff in my book, of trying to make Christians pay for it, they even don't want you to be able to hinder the decision if they're going that way. Like, Gretchen Whitmer defunded money in the budget, or vetoed budget money for pregnancy crisis centers, or like stuff that was supposed to encourage like adoption over abortion. There was Pocahontas, what's her Elizabeth Warren. She was very upset that pregnancy crisis centers outnumber abortion clinics in her state. You had Keith Ellison, who decided to issue consumer warning reports, about pregnancy crisis centers. It's very clear that people do not want you to be even able to divert your decision. So it's one thing to say you're pro-choice. If you're watching, you're pro-choice. I'm just going to pose this question to you. If you're watching and you're pro-choice, how much time do you devote to the other choice, the other choice of not having the abortion? Because if we're going to argue that it's necessary and a necessary evil, I think it should be like one of the last option on the table, because we are talking about taking someone's life. If you don't believe it's a life, that's a different conversation, but we're just going to assume that we're on the same page as far as this. So if that's an option that has to be on the table, it has to be like one that is reached like toward the end of exhausting other options. So how much time do we talk about prevention and education, or just really trying to convince her to raise the self, or adoption, but I see all these other options sort of attacked. And then I see all this misinformation and scare tactics. Because I haven't mentioned abortion now, I wonder if eventually in this video, you'll see the warning at the bottom, which there's other videos I've done about abortion, and at the bottom there's a label from NIH. And the definition, if you click on it, it'll be like, abortion is a procedure that ends a pregnancy. And how they phrase it. And I'm like, this could be a C-section. What the heck? Like, that's not what it is. Just to end a pregnancy, like, birth ends a pregnancy. What does that even mean? So there's just all these euphemisms and other stuff like that. So there's, how much education do you push people to have to know the stages of development and the embryology and other things like that? Have you looked at the procedure, and do you know what it really entails? So how much time do you devote to actually trying to offer other choices or present other choices? And you could say, well, there's these people on the right who are really pushing to ban it, so you might feel defensive, like you have to defend the abortion itself, but that shouldn't be 50-50. Not all decisions are equal. Like, I could tell you that I need some money. Please go ahead and donate to blacktnews.com. But I could tell you that I needed money personally, And if I said I need money, there's different options, right? I could go work, I could ask to borrow it from you, or I could rob you, right? That's an option. Or I could go rob a bank. You wouldn't weigh all these options for me the same. You would encourage some over others, correct? So if you are pro-choice, I just ask you, how much time do you devote to the choices and not just the choice to choose abortion? I just want to throw that out there. But back to my other point, yeah, there's people who are Christian who I think if you just push and keep having the conversation, that maybe they'll get to a point where they're like, maybe you have a point. So I don't want to throw everyone away and just be like, you're an evil person because we see things differently. So I think, again, that was a really good point from Biden. Unfortunately, that has nothing to do with the life that he's lived, at least especially dealing with people on the other side of the aisle. I'm not saying that he hasn't worked with people on the other side of the aisle, especially when he's a senator. So you got to work to get things passed. But he's also, the person who did the high-tech lynching of Clarence Thomas. And we know how he's talked about people today, people like myself, like he thinks we're the extremists or whatever. So, they won't even mention in his administration that what happened in Nashville was a hate crime, or even if asked the question, like if they were targeted because they were Christian, would it be a hate crime? They're like, we can't say. And by the way, me bringing that up, like some people were like, conservatives shouldn't be for hate crimes or something. Like, I'm bringing it up because they will easily label other things hate crimes, but they won't say the same thing for Christians because there's a bias there. I'm just trying to recognize the bias. So, yeah, that good advice from Biden, but I wish he would really feel that way and apply it. Last thing I'll mention before I move on to this article that I want to talk about is when I went to a Democrat Party picnic, it was like 2 summers ago now, and they didn't know I was a Republican. They legit were saying things like Republicans and Trump and other people have no empathy. They don't care about anyone, which I thought was pretty amazing, because you don't think people care about their kids. You don't think, and some people think that, like, you want your guns, you want kids to die. It's like, that's not true. And I've gone through, read a lot of comments on videos that I've made about guns, and people have said things like, my house was broken into, my kids were in the house, I'm so glad that I had a firearm and I transformed into a Navy SEAL, or some people are like, I'm very injured, this is the only thing that's, I can't fight off anybody, this is what's keeping me safe. So just because you have a different perspective on things does not mean that your person who you're ideologically opposed to is an enemy or is evil. So I really wish that we wouldn't assume so many motives from people. Unfortunately, that's just not the state of our politics. And it's definitely not something that Biden openly encourages. I wish that he would practice what he preached. What he told those kids was pretty good. That was a good thing to tell those kids. I wouldn't necessarily say that was the key to success itself, but it was good advice, and I really, really genuinely wish that he would take it. Okay, so let's go through this article that I read today that I thought was pretty hilarious. So this is from, I won't remind you guys, this is from Sarah Jones from New York Magazine. Children are not property, the idea that underlines a right-wing campaign for parents' rights. So I don't think kids are property. I think that a lot of people treat kids like property, especially if they're in the womb, and that's why people like my body, my choice. And so I do think there's a bit of that there, but she does mention abortion, not in the kind of frame that I just said it, but that eventually makes it in the article. So we will go through it. Okay. Make it nice and big because I'm kind of blind. Okay. Alrighty. Train up a child in the way that he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. The book of Proverbs says, to certain right-wing Christians, the concept is simple. A child can be broken or stamped into shape, much like any domesticated animal. I don't really think that's what Proverbs was trying to get at there, but you can see the tone of where we're going here. Do you guys remember that thing I just said about Biden and how he said, we shouldn't just assume motive like that. So, yeah. It's not that you want to break your kids. You just want to help guide them into being moral, good people, being moral, wise, good people. Children, they need help. If you've ever raised one or been around one or just watched them grow, or I don't know, just been a kid and grown up with other people, or just people you've had age differences with, or maybe you're mentally more mature than other people around you. You see that people need a hand to guide them. The question is, though, and just keep this in mind as we go through this article, is there people out there who resent that people want to steer their kids in a good direction or right direction because they're the ones who want to influence the kids and feel like the parents are making all these mistakes, etc., and they're not good, they're not moral. That's why you have, Chris Evans, who played Captain America, was saying that that people will die out. He'll be glad when certain people die off like dinosaurs because, they don't adhere to his particular, ideology when it comes to LGBT issues and stuff. So they don't like you. They don't like you. But if you're not training up your child, who will train up the child? Who will train up the child if you don't train up the child? Because they're going to be influenced by someone. And if you're someone who's grown and who has a pretty good handle on good morality and other things, why would you let other people have influence? We wouldn't even have to talk about the ideology in school and stuff. Just think about your bad neighbors that you had, bad kids. Were there times in your life when your parent was like, I don't want you hanging out with them kids, them bad kids that do X, Y, and Z. Some people are like, kids aren't bad. A lot of people are bad. Behavior. Yeah, kids can be a terror. But kids will influence each other. So if you don't influence your kids and try to steer them into a good way, whether they're being raised by their peers or they're being raised by some kind of woke person who has transition closets in the school, yes, that is a thing. It's just warfare, and they're trying to gain ground on your kids. Gain ground on your kids. That's what they want. It's absolutely what they want. But I'll keep going. Domesticated like animal. Though all parents hope they'll pass their values on to their children, for some that hope is more of a mandate. My own parents believe that Proverbs is the word of God. So you see this bitterness right now. And they believed too that a righteous upbringing would produce an adult in their image. I wonder what denomination her parents were, because I guess not that it matters, but because there's a ton of ex-evangelical people all over TikTok. They don't believe in God, but he's still their God because they can't stop talking about him. But Catholics are ex-Catholics seem to be particularly resentful. So I wonder what denomination she has rejected. But who can blame them? The idea that a child should replicate their parents does not belong only to conservative Christianity or to religion at all. A proverb is common wisdom, and lately this one is hard to escape. Authoritarianism is gospel to modern conservatives. Nowhere is that clearer than in their assaults on children. The parental rights movement is not new, but it is enjoying a resurgence. Adherents say that they're protecting children from harm, broadly defined after an art teacher at a Florida charter school showed students a picture of Michelangelo's David. Parental complaints forced out the principal. I didn't have time to look at that story. Members of Moms of Liberty call for book bans across the country. Books with LGBT content are a special risk of removal. Some of the books that they have in schools are just totally abhorrent. If you've seen things like This Book is Gay, I have a video that I did talking about on the debate stage with Gretchen Whitmer and Tudor Dixon, and I showed some stuff about from that book is gay, which even has in it, like, encourages people to go, like, shows kids how to go on apps to talk to other gay people. And it's just really creepy. There was a big story about how some Muslims were protesting with a bunch of other people about it. I'm pretty sure this is part of the reason why they elected like 3 Muslims to leadership at the Michigan Republican Party. So that's revolutionary for sure. But there's a part in that book that tells people how to talk about homosexuality to Muslims. So I'm not really surprised that they're like, what is this book doing? And why they're particularly offended by it. But yeah, there's some graphic content in there. There's a lot of graphic content in quite a few of these books that they're putting in schools, but you'll have these activists who be so protective of them because they're LGBT, and they hide behind that. I mean, it's what they want to introduce to people. Like, people believe that kids should see kink and weird stuff. As a matter of fact, there was an article that was in the Washington Post some time ago about how their kids should see kink at pride festivals. So these people, they just want access to your kids for weird stuff. But back to her saying that about being all trying to be all oppressive or fascist or whatever. There was a post by the Michigan Democrats, and it's so sad that this did not get them to like lose the whole election and they just swept. Because this definitely was controversial when it happened, and Republicans should have had that on every piece of literature possible. But the Democrats, this is a real post they posted. As a matter of fact, when I first saw it, I'm like, is this real? Because this is too crazy to be real. And it was real. But they said, where did they get this idea that parents are supposed to control how their kids are educated? It's the society that gets to decide, not the parents. And it's like, bro, who's the society? Who's the society? The society of what? Who is the society? Are you like some weirdos in black cloaks meeting somewhere to decide if this book is gay should go in the school? Like, who is the society that decides that? And why isn't it the taxpayers? Why is it the taxpayers? So, after there was outrage about it, they took it down and they're like, oh, this doesn't reflect our candidates. I'm like, oh, of course it does. Absolutely, of course it does. They want your kids to go to I'm not a big fan of public schools. I did graduate from public schools. I graduated, half my career was like an inner city school, and then I moved out to like a rural school. And the rural school was nice. And, I don't know how nice it is now, but it was nice. You ran into woke teachers, but I pushed back and could combat them and stuff. And, there's probably a lot more than there used to be now. And I don't know so much about the school where I graduated from, but I just wouldn't put my kid in a public school. I wouldn't. I would homeschool them. I really would. But, people want your kids to go to schools in these indoctrination farms, and they don't support things like school choice that opens up a lot of options, which they'll get to this in the article, which, this person who's against people being these all authoritarianism and stuff, they're against school choice. Of course they are. The architects of the state bans on gender-affirming care for minors say falsely that children are at risk for predatory physicians and activists. A gender cult destroys families, claimed conservative commentator Matt Walsh. That is true. The child they held as a baby and raised and gave their lives to and love and still love becomes suddenly unrecognizable, he said. I would rather be dead than have that happen to my kids. The real sin isn't that trans youth will suffer, but the parental grip may loosen. I was trying to find the context of him saying that, but I don't really think it needs much context. I mean, he's very passionate. He doesn't want to stand by while there is this social contagion, and some people get mad. Like, I did a video where I mentioned social contagion. Like, I was with you two, you said social contagion. I'm like, guys, there is a social contagion. There is a social contagion. It doesn't mean that people aren't actually dysphoric. That's not what that means. But but their gender dysphoria isn't popping up in the sort of usual conventional ways. You'll see that, like, especially girls, usually it was like young men or whatever that would experience different signs in like adolescence, and now it's like young women who didn't have any signs before, but they spent a lot of time on the internet, they're on Reddit, they're on Tumblr, they went to school where they were in these friends groups where everyone was trans and non-binary, etc., and then they come back and their hair's chopped off and they said, I think I'm a boy, you know. And then it's also this idea that the best way to treat people with dysphoria is to push the transition. There's another thing too, but I can't think of off the top of my head. But when people say that there's a contagion, it means specific things. But yeah, there's been families that have been separated, not just from like the own sort of internal explosion of when you don't affirm your kids. There have been people who've lost custody of their children for not affirming kids' identity. So Matt is not Walsh Matt is Walsh. Matt is not wrong. Was what I meant to say when he says that there are people blowing up families. That is just the truth. And there's a Jeffrey Marsh, he's that creepy guy who's like, "Hi kids." He'll talk about going no contact, and I can't say that I've heard him say directly to a child that they should go no contact. I haven't heard him say that, but kids do have parents, right? And he'll talk about going no contact a lot. And some people are like, oh, it's therapeutic to go no contact with, but it's like, but you think they're toxic if they just don't affirm your identity. Like, that's not a good reason to cut your parents out of your life. You're trying to just protect your delusion, as opposed to, like, your mom isn't good. There's going to be other people who don't affirm you. So why cut out people who love you and go start off somewhere else? It just kind of sounds like you're just protecting you're joining a cult and protecting your illness. That's what it sounds like. Conservative interest in the child extends beyond a traditional hostility to LGBT people. This person is so Christophobic. It's so funny. In March, Arkansas Governor Sarah Huckabee Sanders, a Republican, signed a bill into law that makes it easier for companies to hire children under 16 years old. There are people on social media flipping out, like, about kids who are minors working. Minors work and have been working. Like, when I went to school, and there were several kids who were in like the top 10. I was 9, by the way, who were in the top 10 who had jobs on top of all the other academic stuff and sports stuff that they did. It was like a something that, you know, the principal like incorporated into the speech and stuff as he like honored the kids and stuff. So like my aunt started working like really young, like for the city. So it's not strange that there's people who go out and learn the value of a dollar at a young age. So I don't understand what's all the hostility for kids working. More states may follow, as Terry Gerstein, the director of Harvard Law School Labor and Work-Life Program State and Local Enforcement Project, pointed out in the New York Times. Bills that would allow 14 to 15-year-olds to work in meatpacking plants and other dangerous jobs in Iowa as part of training programs, and 16 and 17-year-olds to take jobs at construction sites in Minnesota are under consideration. That's probably good money. Like, what are they supposed to do? Like, go flip burgers? What if that's the route they want to go toward, and toward their future, whatever, and they could get a job there and retire at a, earlier than you will. What I'm not seeing the problem here. Gernstein wrote, noting that bills coincide with the rise of dangerous child labor violations not long after. Now, there shouldn't be child labor law violations and stuff, yeah, but long after Republicans sought to put more children to work in Arkansas, Republicans in North Dakota killed a bill that would have expanded a free lunch program for the children from low-income families. So I did read up on this one. At least it seemed like every source that I was finding for it was kind of biased. So I was trying to do some more digging, but essentially you already get money from the government for the funding for school lunch programs, and this was just to expand it some more, and it passed the House, but then it didn't pass the Senate. I think maybe it went down by 1 vote, and people were really mad because like later on they voted to give themselves like I think a $10 increase for when they go do things around the state, like on state business, but they're like reimbursed for like their meal plans or something. Instead of like being $35, it was $45. And they said it was to adjust for inflation. And they're like, how dare you not expand for the kids, but you do your lunch. And so a lot of the other people were like, we don't see the correlation. I can see how people would make the correlation though. So that's the background there. I didn't find more on it, at least from the sources I was looking at, but it seemed kind of biased. But that's the background. If you believe there is already federal dollars going to the lunch programs. But I do think it's funny though, because you guys know that I've talked about Joe Biden. He has like different guidances for the school lunch programs and stuff. So if your school like doesn't adhere to like the LGBT policies, your school could lose school lunch programs and funding, period. So I don't see a lot of people outraging about that, because that's pretty bad. And I've seen a few schools them go after, but there have been lawsuits and they've gotten special exemptions, but it's still in place. So if it's very possible that if a boy wants to go into your girl's locker room and you're like, I don't want that, and you get into a little tiff and the school stands up for you and your daughter, that Biden could pull the money. So I wish that was something that we talked more about on the campaign trail. I certainly brought it up, but it should have been something that was talked about more, but it is what it is. Is a problem that the state of North Dakota is really a problem of parents being negligent with their kids, said State Senator Mike Wabima. His message was clear enough. A hungry child is not the collective responsibility, but a private failing on part of the parents. It is a private failing on part of the parents. But again, the federal dollars do pay for that as well. So it's possible to draw a line between Woolman's remark, the push for child labor, and the right's attack on trans children. In each case, conservatives betray a conviction that a child is the property of parents. Because parents own their children, they can dispose of the child as they see fit. They can dispose of the child as they see. You guys know I'm pro-life, so this is like triggering bells in my head because I know this person isn't pro-life. They don't give that vibe at all. So I did ask them, I'm like, does this mean that you're pro-life? You don't think they're property? Expose of them. So there's that. There are people who think they can dispose of children as they see fit, but they just tell themselves they're not children, so they can do it. They're like, it's a fetus. They can deny them evidence-based medical care. This is just irony. They can make sure a child is sheltered from the dangers of a serious education. When a child goes hungry, that's because a parent isn't caring for their property, and what a person does with their property is their right. There's a lot of help for parents who are in dire financial straits. We have very generous social programs, and again, there is funding for school lunch programs and stuff, but again, not property. It is, parents should take care of their kids and make sure that they're fed. Sometimes it is hard though. I have people who've been following for a while. They know I grew up in a home with a lot of love. We did not always have a lot of money though, and I was on school lunch programs. There were times when, you know, $2 Taco Bell, which that's funny now. There's nothing on that menu that's $2, right? But they used to have a $2 meal deal, and that was like, you know, like you got to get a $2 meal tonight. So sometimes it can get rough and it can get tight, and I do believe as a community you can come together and help people in need. But the government does have social programs, and there are community programs, and as people should give liberally themselves. I think we do try to depend too much on the government, especially people on the left. I heard a good point from a Christian friend of mine. He was talking about how much giving people talk about in the church, and you know, I'm for paying tithes and other kind of stuff like that. But he just, and he is too, I guess, but he just noted that there's a lot of talk in the Bible about giving to the poor, giving to people, etc. And it's not pushed like it is. I'm not saying it's not pushed in churches. It definitely is pushed in a lot of churches. But is it pushed like enough to the point where it really should be pushed? And there are plenty of churches that do like food programs and other stuff like that, and different drives. So I'm not trying to like throw like Christianity under the bus or something, but it could probably be talked about more as a whole. But yeah, I do think we do have a social responsibility to each other, just in general. Does the government have a social responsibility? They do have social programs, so I just don't get where this all just sounds like a reach. It all just sounds like a reach. You know, they needed their example, so they went to the school lunch thing, and they're like, "How dare you not want to expand it? So you think kids are property?" And it's just, that's just not the reality. Like, people were mad at Rand Paul because he said that healthcare isn't a right. It's not, especially not in the United States. If you're from another country, you're like, what do you mean it's not a right? It's not a right. At least, especially not in the United States of America. And even if it was a right, it's definitely not a negative right. It would be a positive right, which would be an entitlement, because it imposes a positive duty on someone else. So healthcare is really a commodity. Like you go, you pay, you get, the doctors do you service, etc. So he's a doctor, and so he's like, you're not entitled to my labor. That's slavery. So people got, are always mad with, his darn libertarian views. But Rand Paul, he would do like free stuff for low income patients. Like if you read up on him, like there's some good stuff about Rand Paul, but he does that because he believes that's his Christian duty to care for people voluntarily himself. That's a duty that he has as someone who believes that we're all made in the image of God, deserving of dignity and respect and stuff. So that's something that he believes that he's supposed to do. So if someone is in need, yes, help someone in need, but attributing, again, so much motive to these people over these examples is a reach. Like any piece of property, a child has value to conservative activists. They are key to the future of the conservative wants to win. Parental rights are merely one path to the total capture of the state power and the imposition of an authoritarian. I don't know why I'm having trouble with this word. Authoritarian hierarchy on us all. So it's no surprise that children have long been a fixation to the right wing. The late Christian Reconstructionist R.J. Rushdoony was a prominent advocate of Christian homeschooling in the 1960s through the 1980s. to Rushdoony, all education was religious, as Dr. Clint Heacock observed in a 2021 piece for Public Eye magazine. So-called government schools are churches in their own right. Rushdoony believed indoctrinating students in the religion of secular humanism. And they're not wrong. They're not wrong. Everybody has beliefs. Everybody pushes some kind of values and etc. And people really, really, really want to do it as far as the LGBT stuff. Absolutely, people are pushing ideology and not just, they're trying to, you know, unchain biology, I mean, sex and gender, but they're really trying to mess up biology. And like, it's not, people are non-binary. It's not true. It's not true. People are so mad about the Parental Rights and Education bill, and which they, you know, call the Don't Say Gay bill. And they're like, we can't talk about our lives to our children, and we can't, you know, teach them that they're a trans unicorn. Like, no, you can't. Just teach them math and reading and science, etc. And you can't teach your fantasy stuff to the kids. I'm sorry. Or you shouldn't be able to. But the real, and that was just for like K through 3. You could still like teach it in other grades if it's like deemed appropriate, which I thought like, nah, you just get the stuff out of there. But another important part of that bill, which they'll kind of reference, I think, is they were if your kids, if there was something going on with your mental health of the child, the school can't keep that from, like, conspire to keep it from the parent. And there are very particular examples of why a bill like that was necessary, because people are like, oh my gosh, why are they making this hateful bill? Because there were instances where schools were hiding information pertaining to their kids' mental health, planning overnight trips, their kids sleeping in the wrong location with the other gender, like doing different stuff like that. But there was one case where a father found out his daughter was, you know, mentally unstable when she tried to unalive herself by hanging. So that's when he found out that she was having gender issues, and they were doing stuff at the school without his knowledge and trying to call her a different name and stuff. So he got her out of school, got her some help, and he reported later that she was fine now. Whether you believe that or whatever, but there are people who are really, really overstepping their bounds. And this article is so dishonest because it's making it seem like, oh, it's these people who are in a homeschool that they see the value in educating their kids and blah. Yes, they do. Because again, if you're not teaching these things to your kid, who else is there? They're mad because you're doing it when they want to do it. They see you as opposition and they're ticked off that you're not asleep at the wheel anymore. That's what this is about. That's why they hate homeschoolers and homeschooling. You know, that's why they don't want school choice, for you to have options. It's not just because the public schools will die off, because they should die off if people want to go to those schools, because the funds will still be appropriated there. But if people want options and they don't pick your public school, guess what? It sounds like there's a problem with the public school that you need to fix. But it's not a bad thing to have competition. The best thing should be, instead of trying to protect these institutions, that you do what's best for the kids. But people historically have always wanted access to the kids, whether it was the Hitler Youth or indoctrinating kids into socialism and communism and all that stuff. You infect a generation and you give them like 10, 15 years and it's over. And you see all these crazy kids on college campuses. This has been going on for a while, but a lot of these people are adults in professions. That's why during the George Floyd riots and other stuff, you had some like lawyers or something that were throwing Molotov cocktails and all this kind of stuff, because these kids never grew up. They like, people thought like the intolerance at the college campuses that people would just get over it. Like, no, this is who you solidified them to be. This is who you allowed them to be. And it's just getting worse. And it will continue to get worse unless people stand up and say, you know what? We need a reset. We need a hard reset. And they're very, very mad that you're not asleep at the wheel. Too many of you still are, but they're very mad that you're awake. He thought parents ought to be solely responsible for the care and the education of their children instead of relinquishing them to an anti-Christian state. That fear of state influence and belief in total parental control isn't limited to Rushdumi. At Salon, the journalist Catherine Joyce reported that Michael Ferris, a Trump ally who is a former president of Alliance Defending Freedom and the founder of the Homeschool Legal Defense Association, launched a parental rights nonprofit in the late aughts that maybe it's supposed to be August or something, I don't know, that sought to amend the Constitution to read the liberty of parents to direct the upbringing, education, and care of their children is a fundamental right. Ferris also objected strenuously to the UN Convention of the Rights of the Child, which the U.S. still hasn't ratified. In his mind, the treaty threatened the parents' right to homeschool and use corporal punishment. No intermediary may come between parents and their property. Take it to extremes, the concept of parental rights can be dangerous and even deadly for children. Proponents like Ferris and Rushdumi before him ignore the basic fact that the home is often no refuge but a place of domination and abuse. And the National Child's Alliance says that over 600,000 children were documented victims of abuse and neglect in 2020, and 77% of substantiated cases a parent committed the abuse. The language of the parental rights can come to a license to torture, as it did in the case of 13-year-old Hannah Grace Rose Williams. In 2011, officials found her face down naked in a emaciated in the backyard. The New York Times reported an investigation later reported malnutrition and hypothermia as her causes of death. Her adoptive parents, Larry and Carrie Williams, were reportedly followers of Michael and Debbie Pearl in their book To Train Up a Child. The book, named for the verse in Proverbs, urges corporal punishment with a switch and says that a little fasting is good training. By the time the Times report, the 3 children, including Williams, had died in homes with Pearl's book on the shelves. The Williams parents are now serving decades in prison for the girls' murders, and they should. They should. It is true that there are parents that are not good, are not kind, that will do terrible things to their children, but not everyone who homeschools their kids would do something like that. But we could talk also about abuse. That abuse will go on anywhere where there are predators who have access to kids. You know, whether it's different coaches doing sexual assault or doctors or teachers, there's a lot of predators in schools. A lot of predators. People want to talk about like stuff that goes on in churches. Schools got a lot of it too. So not making it excuses for people who do terrible things. They should be in jail. That's an absolutely terrible thing. But we were trying to use that to get rid of homeschooling. Kind of sick. And side note though, where was this energy about people being home during the pandemic? Because people wanted to send their kids to school. People wanted kids to be able to hang out with their friends. People wanted to be able them to live their life and not be locked down. But people used children like, not just you're going to kill grandma, but they acted like it was going to be so dangerous for their kids, and the kids were going to be all these carries and stuff. And they had them muzzled and masked while they weren't. Like there's that picture of Stacey Abrams when she's with kids and everyone else has a mask on and she doesn't. People had masks on even up until like the 2020 midterm election in different schools. And some of them like were getting calls from Republicans. They're like, okay, you guys got to stop masking the kids because these Republicans are in on us and really hammering us. So they took off the mask in some of these schools and then they put them back on after the midterm and after the Democrats had their big victory. But it's really crazy how much emphasis there was on keeping the kids out of school so they could keep, you know, I don't know, the teachers unions could keep trying to get fines from the government and these big, enormous bills. And they could spend some of that COVID money on DEI and critical race theory. And I'm not joking. That's what they use some of that COVID money and stuff that they got from those bills from to keep indoctrinating your kids and stuff. So now there's a lot of parents who took their kids out of school because they didn't like the online stuff. And then they realize that they can do it, that they're actually capable of homeschooling their kids, or there's kids that are doing like public school online. And so why do they need you? Why do they need you? If the parents can figure out and do it and do a good job and go at a different pace and teach them some more advanced stuff and not have kids slowing them down. I wasn't homeschooled. I guess my parents, we could have pressured them more. I don't know. They just don't seem like those kind of people. I don't even want to blame it on all the kids that they had. They're just not those kind of people. I probably could have self-taught myself though. But like, just buy the books. I'll teach myself. I forged like great relationships with people and stuff. I don't regret going to school and graduating from public school or anything like that. But I did want to be homeschooled. I really did. And it would have, especially like if it was when I was like in the urban school setting, and if I was homeschooled, I could have really gone at a pace that was advanced. Because if you're a kid in a class with a bunch of other disruptors and bad kids and stuff, and they're just slowing up the whole class with their antics and stuff, that's the worst. There was one year, maybe I was in 4th grade, 5th grade or something, but our class was so bad. And people are like, don't say kids are bad. Our class was bad. It was. I wasn't though. There were some good kids in that class, but the whole class had to be like punished all the time. And it was just like, it was absolutely not fair to people like me. So if your kid is, could really, really blossom by themselves on their own speed, why wouldn't you homeschool your kid? Mom and dad, why wouldn't you homeschool? No, but seriously, why wouldn't you? There's a lot of positives to your kid not going into public school, or at least sending them to a school where they can thrive because they have those funds and options with school choice. But people like this don't support it. State laws passed by conservative Republicans made LGBTQ children in particular more vulnerable to abuse home by practically requiring schools to out them to their parents. They're talking about things like the Parental Rights and Education Bill in Florida. Again, if your child, there was a school in California, like literally like went in and changed the medical records of the children. Like, you should not be making gender plans with other people's children and planning what bunk they're gonna sleep in overnight trips. That's ridiculous. Even if you take like the gender ideology stuff out of it, I do not trust people who don't respect like a parental authority. If there's no trust there, like, you cannot. I wouldn't care if it was a family member. Like, if you don't understand that there's a line not to cross and you're not the parent and you feel okay with like keeping pretty serious things from me, you won't have access to my child because I can't trust you, period. So that kind of stuff gets me like heated. Like, it's not about like just outing your kids. It's about like, if someone is trans, you do understand that there's something like mentally wrong. Like, people don't, like, it's taboo to say, but you can't feel that way if you say, or you have no right, in my opinion, to believe, to feel that way if you're going to say you have to affirm them or they're going to unalive themselves. Like, there's something wrong. So if someone is feeling that way, why wouldn't you go to the parents so they can get them proper care and help? You don't just say, oh, we're going to change your name and we're going to change your name here. But when we talk to your parents about you, we're going to use your real name and your other pronouns. You're just teaching deception. You're just teaching deception. And in my house, growing up, one thing that could get you punished really hard is a breach of trust. That was the thing, because my dad said, I need to look you in the eye. If something serious happens, I need to be able to look you in the eye and know that you're telling the truth. So the worst punishments or whatever I got was like for being deceptive, and it was pretty darn deceptive. But when you do those sorts of things, like that was, we need to correct the situation because the truth matters and trust matters. So when there's people out there who want to teach your kids to be deceptive to you, you cut those people out. That's my advice to you. Far-right activists invent tales of wanton surgeries on minors and irreversible hormone treatments. Those things are true. Ask Chloe Cole. There are minors who have had these treatments. Their voices are changed forever. Their breasts are gone. It's happened to minors pretend otherwise is crazy. So now you know what kind of person this is. Did all this research, but just was like, well, it happens. In doing so, they obscure the high, I'll say unalive rate because I don't want to get marked, among LGBT youth who need gender-affirming care as a matter of life and death. I just mentioned how they say it's life or death. You gotta do it or they're gonna, obviously something wrong there, a mental health problem. Children who, this isn't a trend. It's not fun. It's not a game, and people treat it like it's a game. Like it is someone's mental health. These people who think that they should be able to keep that from parents, it is sick. Absolutely sick. Children who work may be exposed to adult dangers like workplace injury or sexual harassment. Well, that's true. In the home and at school, children must also fear gun violence in the name of the Second Amendment. So just throw in the guns. Adults who encourage the proliferation of guns do so knowing well that children will die. In their hierarchy, the adult right to a gun is worth more than the child's right to live, reduced to the level of a collectible or beloved pet. The child is not a person to the right. I already mentioned this. I don't know if I mentioned while I was ranting in this article or this segment, but people buy guns to protect their families. And when Ben Shapiro was a kid in school, a shooter passed by his place, his school where he was at, because there was security. So, I mean, the Buffalo shooter picked his targets because of restrictive gun laws. So, your kid being in a gun-free zone, shootings, regardless of the news and how much you hear about it, they don't happen that often. They happen too often. But it's a reasonable concern. I don't want people to have irrational fears and not be able to live their lives. However, if you are in a gun-free zone, that you are like exposed. So I would recommend hardening schools. We harden everything else. After 9/11, did we not up our security? After, presidents were in harm, did we not up security with them? Interesting thing about Abraham Lincoln, he actually started the Secret Service, but they weren't supposed to. They had a different purpose, but obviously they did not help him out there. So interesting, little bit of history tidbit. But we make sure that every other place is secure, but not so much our schools. So if you're not in a place where you can put your kid in some place where they're protected, again, I wouldn't put him in a school, to be frank, but that's just my opinion anyway. But yeah, people use guns to protect their families. And I already mentioned how people have told me how people broke in, their kids were in the house, they were glad they were able to have a firearm to protect their kids. There's this one video of this mother, she's getting in a car, or a man jumps in her car, her kids are in the back, and he wants her to get out. He's hijacking her, he's taking the car, her kids in the car, and she's begging him sir, please don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. And so she's begging him not to steal their car with her kids inside and stuff. And so she warns him a couple times. She had a gun with her, and she blew him away. And I'm glad that she was able to do that. Not because I'm glad that he's, that there's violence or something that occurred, but I'm glad that she had a means to protect herself and save her children. So guns are inanimate objects. Guns in the hands of evil men who have bad motives, that is dangerous. But there are other sources of weapons. When we were kids, because of the Oklahoma bomber, my sister told me the other day, people were concerned about whether there'd be bombs in schools. We weren't talking, but I might have been still talking about guns a bit, but people were concerned about bombs, So after there was certain attacks, I think most of them were going on in Europe, if I'm not mistaken, but people were started driving cars into people, and then people just started at important places. They started erecting like these cement barriers or whatever. Like if you go to the White House, there's these barriers or whatever that you can't just like, if you drive, you're gonna hit like a cement block or something. So people adjust when there are dangers, but to think that people care about their guns more than their kids, that's sick. It's a very sick thing to suggest. But again, the Second Amendment you can use it to hunt, you can use it for sport, you can use it for your self-preservation, but it is also to stop a tyrannical government, or at least, hey, warning here, we are armed, and we will at least fight for our liberties. And that's not just a selfish thing for you. It's for your kids, for their future. So it is really about protection. Evil people will do evil things with whatever. But again, it's very interesting that she feels this way and is talking about property and how you don't care about kids, etc., blah, blah, blah. And there's this whole thing in my head that's just like, what about abortion? What about abortion? So then she mentions it. So here we are at the abortion part. Only the unborn are spared the right's cruelty. The conservatives claim personhood for the fetus, who cannot disobey and requires nothing but a womb. The fetus is more valuable than the child because the fetus is a means to an end. The subjugation of women, once born, a child's value depreciates. This is sick. Okay, so I don't care about personhood. Personhood is a philosophical concept. People have, there's a particular like 5 different standards of it. I talk about it in my book and stuff too, and I go through philosophy and other stuff, but we know they're human and alive. They meet the characteristics of life. The purpose of personhood is to disqualify from that. So people on the right, it's not that we're arguing that they're persons. Your concept of personhood is flawed because you wouldn't apply all the standards that you apply to try to disqualify a fetus. You wouldn't apply them the same way to everyone outside of the womb. So there's flaws in that argument. But again, it's the same baby, the same child who you would grieve if something happened to them outside the womb is the same one who is in your womb. It's the same one. Like, we're talking about location, like inches of skin and time. That's the difference. So they're saying they don't care about a child. We think the fetus is a child, and they are a child. A child is a son or daughter of any age. And to think that it's about oppressing women, that's just not true. How many women are pro-life? I guess you could say I'm just a hater of women or something, and that's why I'm actually pro-life. If you don't have a right to life, guys, if there is no right to life, do we have any unalienable rights? Because you can't have any rights unless you're alive. So if we're saying that someone gets to pick and choose whether you have that right based on how they feel about you, your value, what if they're gonna give you that value, if you don't have inherent value and you don't have that like a natural sort of God-given right, it has to be assigned. How do you have any rights at all? To be frank, if you don't have life. Like Rush Limbaugh would talk about how people would get annoyed with him or conservatives because they're like, we've got to get off the pro-life thing. And it's just like, guys, what's the point of fighting about anything if we're not going to stand our ground here? Like, this is the thing to fight for. And he just complained about how people just didn't get it. But this person is so in their feels, it's crazy. The parental rights to train the child takes precedence over a child's basic rights. There are ways to circumvent a child's established right to an education. As conservatives know, homeschooling laws are so lax in the U.S. that thousands of children have essentially disappeared into the academic void. What does that even mean? There's so many kids who are homeschooled who are so far above, in learning. And every homeschooler I met was pretty smart. A little weird, but I'm a little weird, socially awkward. So, like something will happen. I'm like, oh, I can tell you're homeschooled. Not that they were like extraordinarily weird, but just like, oh, I can see that. I can see that. But as far as this academic void they're talking about, there are people, at least in my state, who want homeschoolers to be registered because they're like, there's people who've disappeared. And it's like, why do you want a list of these people? It sounds suspicious. Like, you want lists so you can take some kind of action. I don't think this is just a thing of curiosity. Even if a child goes to public school, chronic underfunding deprives many children, especially in poor areas, of a sound education. Public schools get so much money. And again, if they do introduce school choice and the dollars follow the child, and the children and the parents don't want to go to public school, that's an issue, and you're admitting that people don't want to go there. They're just kind of trapped. So shouldn't we do something about that? And people say, oh, we can fix it. We have more funding. Do you know how many people steal money or just mismanage funds? We're running out of time, so I don't have the whole. I don't have time to tell the whole story. But there were computers that my sister had, my oldest sister, that she discovered her high school had, that they just never set up. And by the time she discovered them, they were already old. They were donated by like Bill Gates, and they just never set up the computers. There's a lack of money or resources is not all the reasons why a lot of these schools just aren't good. Some of it is just administrative. And that same sister, by the way, she had like, she's supposed to go to school, to any school in the state. She had scholarships from all over the place that she wouldn't even have to pay for books. And the darn people at the school messed it up. She called my dad crying while he was in London about how they messed up her scholarships. So it is not just a lack of money that is the problem in a lot of these schools. So spare me. Like, everyone should be judged on their merit. They should not just be protected because they're the public indoctrination camps. Oh gosh, I was gonna say we're almost done. I think we're almost done. In much of the country, trans youth aren't treated like people with medical needs, but political targets. And I agree, and that's a lot. And a lot of people on the left are the ones who are treating them like political pawns. This is ownership, and the U.S. rarely interferes. There is one exception to the rights belief in the absolute parental rule. Trans affirming parents, a defiant parent is a threat to the right. They've stepped out of place and must be subdued. So the question is, are you abusing your kids? And that's why people are like, this is sick. So this person already believes that you shouldn't abuse your kids because they called out homeschool parents and stuff that treated their kids horribly. So the question is it child abuse to give your kids, you can't understand like what life will be like or what puberty stuff will really be like, puberty blockers that are chemical castration drugs? Is it abuse to chop off their breasts? Is it abuse to, do other sort of things to their bodies as minors? Is that abuse? A lot of people say yes. So I guess we can keep having that debate, but that's really the difference there. I don't think you think that parents should just be able to abuse their kids. And I don't mean just even discipline. I mean like abuse. Abuse. In this perspective, rights aren't innate. They're determined instead of by a person's place in the conservative hierarchy. The opposite view that everyone has rights by virtue of their humanity requires us to change the way we commonly think of children. Liberals aren't immune to the belief that children are property. Abortion. The mainstream fear-mongering over trans youth tells us that much, yet combating the power of the parental rights movement requires an answering conviction in the rights of children. We can see them as people, uniquely vulnerable, yes, but nevertheless people who have independent minds and will develop private lives of their own. I'll mention this. There was a petition about Peppa the Pig, and if you guys don't know what Peppa Pig is, you're probably living under a rock, but it's a British TV show. Art is really simple, and I don't get it, but it's a big TV show. But so people started a petition to get like a gay couple on Peppa Pig. And I don't know if the petition had anything to do with them actually introducing a gay couple on Peppa Pig, but what I thought was interesting in the petition is that they thought it was necessary because so many kids, of course, watch it, and they mentioned that kids are malleable. And I'm like, there you go. They want to put stuff in there. And this is no secret, but they just like, I appreciated the honesty. The reason why they want to have access in the schools to your kids and to put all the stuff in media and everywhere is because your kids are vulnerable. Yes, your kids are malleable, and they're the ones who want to shape them. And they resent parents who are in the way. There's no way to control a child forever. My parents learned that much. So you've got the bitter tone from this person, like I'm sure this whole entire article. So now we get to the background. There's no way to control a child forever. My parents learned that much. I hid books from them and discovered different ways of thinking through literature and future online searching. In relative short order, I became an atheist and a socialist, a fate so dire that a former trustee at my evangelical college told me he hoped my parents died before they knew the truth. They did not share his sentiment. If my example means anything, it's this: children are not dogs to train, but adults in formation. They will learn someday soon that the future belongs to them. What they do with that knowledge matters to everyone. Children aren't private property then, but a public responsibility. To expand our democratic project to children is to grant them the security the right seeks to deny them: education, healthcare, shelter, food. A better America begins with the child. So the whole idea is this atheist socialist believes your children are a responsibility of the state and belong to the state, not the parents. That's the gist of the argument. That's the gist of the argument. That's the end. That's the end. That's the end. Did I have to tell you guys that she was an atheist socialist, or did you guess that? Could you guess that? Because I was not surprised when I got to that piece of information. Yeah, that's the end of the article. And that goes back to that social media post I told you guys about the Michigan Democrats put out and said, where'd they get this idea that that the parents are supposed to get a say in their education or their curriculum? It's up to the society. The society gets to decide. So it's just that attitude of that you're like, it takes a village, but so I'm not surprised she's a socialist. She understands the power of using kids and training up kids, but she just doesn't want parents to do it. She wants the state to do it because they're all like, she wants to forge them in a direction where they can continue to dismantle our country. Just to be, I'm just thinking about all this sort of like Marxist stuff about destroying the family and getting to the kids and, issues that people have with fathers and how they're upset how fathers instill within their children the right to sort of ideas about authority and stuff. There's a reason why you have to pull down different social structures and stuff to uplift socialism and then communism and stuff, and family is one of those pillars you got to strike down. That's what BLM trained by they were trained Marxists is what they said. If you went through their what we believe page, they've supported every single group, every single kind of person except a black father. But they said that they wanted to dismantle cisgender privilege. And they also said that they wanted to disrupt the nuclear family. The idea of the Western prescribed nuclear family is what they said. So I'm not surprised at all that was a socialist who wrote that article. Poor thing. I wonder what happened to make her so absolutely bitter about religion and angry at her parents and stuff. I wonder if they were kooky. I wonder if they're kind and she just got indoctrinated somewhere. exposed to something, maybe, you know, a lot of times when I see people talk about why they left their religion, sometimes we over really silly things. I'm like, you could have studied just a little bit more and got some clarity. But I don't know. A lot of times maybe it's just a heart issue, and they start looking at things with a very critical eye instead of a fair eye, and they get to the conclusion that they want to get to. So poor girl. I guess keep her in your prayers. But fight her tooth and nail. The battlefront of minds. Anyway, thank you guys for joining me. I hope you guys enjoyed the show today. Please go to blacktnews.com, check out different content that I have, articles, etc. that I have posted, and feel free to share them. I'm glad that I shared some of my abortion ones recently, and people really, really like them, so I will continue to share and with you guys. And please, if you like what I do here, consider leaving a donation at the website, blacktnews.com/donate. Costs to stream, run my website, all that good stuff. So if you can help with that overhead and help us expand a bit, God bless you. I very much appreciate it. Also check out different merch that we have, at the store, like the Roe and Casey imported and Life Wins shirts. I wore the XX Club yesterday live, but again, I got the Black Tea mugs and the My Money, My Business shirt. Which another thing that's disturbing about these people who are so anti-parent, it's like, if something actually happens to your kid, you know, who nurses that kid, who takes care of that kid, who has to bury that kid? It's not a teacher, it's not an activist, it's that parent. You know, when I mentioned how someone lost custody of their kids because of the trans issue, to watch that mother just grieve, because the story ended with her child stepping in front of a train, and to watch her just tremble with grief was awful. But where are those activists? Where are those activists? The mother's grieving her alone. So protect your kids. God bless you guys, and I'll see you tomorrow.